Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and show you how to do a basic title, and we're going to use our existing video that we have in our timeline right now of this young man Caleb over here in the program window, and get started with that so you can learn about a new panel and how to create titles. So basically we're going to go ahead and go up to the main menu up here and select File, and in the drop down we're going to navigate down to New, come over to the right and select Legacy Title. This will give us a new title window. This is every time you get this window every time you create a new item like a bin or a sequence, or you don't get it when you create a bin, but you got to create a sequence, etc. in the title. So we're going to call this Caleb. We'll just name it his name. His last name is Nagasa. I know this because I shot this video, and it's basically confirming the settings that you want, which are going to match the sequence. So by default, that's usually going to pretty much be matching everything. You just click OK. If you need to change that for some reason, you of course can change those settings. So we're going to just click OK, and it essentially pops you right into the titler. And I'm going to slide that over. It is a floating independent panel here, which is really nice, and it automatically saves it in your project bin right away. So you've already have an icon here for the title with the name. So going into the titler window, it is comprised of 5 separate panels within the window, within the main titler. You've got the main title window here, which is where you do your design and typing and all of that. On the left, you've got a tools panel, similar kind of like to what you have in Premiere, but this is largely comprised of a pointer, a rotation tool, various type tools. We're not going to get through all of them in this lesson. We're going to cover the basic ones. Some pen tools and some shapes. Below that, you have an actions panel, which basically has to do with alignment, just centering your text, justifying it left, right, etc., etc., etc. On the bottom, you have something known as a styles panel, which is actually pretty interesting. It's got default styles that you can automatically apply, like templates. You can also create your own style and save it to this collection. On the right is the properties panel, which is basically where you create your text in terms of what kind of font you want, shadow, strokes, etc. So let's go ahead and type this gentleman's name. We're going to come over to the tools panel and select the type tool. Next to that, there is a vertical type tool, which allows you to type vertically. We're going to just go horizontal. I'm going to come down here approximately somewhere in the frame. I'm going to type his name. Caleb, last name is Nagasa. Okay, so now by default, it's sitting inside this box. At this point, I want to maybe adjust the font and add a shadow, change the fill color, and then position it. So I'm going to go back up here to the tools panel and select my selection tool. When I bring that down and hover over the text, it gives me this box with these squares. That's known as a bounding box. But basically what that does is it makes it active so that now over here on the right, I've got all my properties illuminated, and they're all now active, so I can adjust my various properties. We're not going to go through every one of these because there's a lot. We'll do the basics. But basically, you've got under transform, and these are all little drop downs, right? So if they're collapsed, open them up. You have opacity. Just real quick, I can click and drag this value up and down. You can see that I adjust my opacity. And as mentioned before, anytime you see this blue text like this, okay, it's known as a hot text field. So I can actually click in that window and just set a value. Go back to 100% here in opacity, and it brings my opacity back up to 100%. X position is your horizontal. We'll be dealing a lot more with X and Y positions when we get into keyframing. There's your Y, which is your vertical. Okay, if I want to set those back, I can also, as previously mentioned, do these things in a number of different ways. This is not the only way that I can adjust X and Y. I can also click down here on Caleb while it's in that bounding box. I can use my arrow keys left and right, and my arrow keys up and down to adjust and reposition. It's also known as nudging in the Premiere lingo. So anybody who's worked with Photoshop has worked with that before. You've got width, height, etc. You can rotate here. Okay, I'm going to Control Z, set that back. This one here is really nice, the font family. This allows you to browse your font. Right now we're on this Berkeley font, But with this open and with your text in the bounding box, I can simply use my down arrow and I can scroll through here and I can look at my fonts. So I'm going to find a font that's nice and thick because it'll just be easier to see, you know, the various properties that we choose. Let me find one here that's nice and thick. That one's nice and thick. That's a pretty good, solid, thick font. It's a Berlin Sans FB Demi. Not sure what it all means, but we're going to select it. Below that, you've also got some other adjustments. You've got a bold there, which I think is the default. Okay, so now I've got that, and it's a little bit big for what I'm looking at. Here's why I know this, because within this window, you've got a couple of squares. Okay, here's your full window out here on the outskirts. This outer box that you see, these are guides. This is known as your video safe. Okay. Then inside there's another box. This is known as your title safe. So my title needs to fit within this inside box. Okay, these will come up by default, but you can also right click in this window, and when you hit, not when you hit graphic, when you hit view, you can see if these things are enabled. So if you don't see them there, you can always enable them here. Okay, but by default they should always come up, and it is best practice to have them there. So let me click on Caleb, and now I'm going to adjust his size. So I'm going to come down over here to the right side, font size on my right side, properties panel, click and just drag, and just bring that in so it's safely inside that title safe. So there it is. I'm going to put it in there, and now I'm going to drop it down to the bottom in what's known as a lower third position, which is a standard compositional spot, so to speak, on the frame. It breaks the frame up in thirds. You have an upper, a middle, and a lower third. There's actually a preset for that. So if you right click on the text and you come down to position, you see that down here there is a lower third option. Click on that and it positions it in what's known as the lower third. So that way it's usually somewhere in the lower part of the frame where you can still see the talking head, etc. And if you need to, you can make that a little bit smaller. I can actually position my mouse on this corner square, hold down my mouse and drag, and it will resize it a little bit. So I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. Okay, now with that highlighted, you've got a number of different things you can do here. I won't get into too many. Let's get into some basic fill and shadow. So down here you have fill, and you can choose a solid color, which right now is white. If you hit the drop down, you get some gradient options. Let's just stick with solid for this first lesson. So right now it's white. I want to change that. So I click in this box, which gets me into the color picker, which we've seen before. I'm going to choose maybe kind of a brighter color, maybe kind of a yellow. And you can see right here I picked a yellow, and I get this warning signal over here. Okay, this is makes the color broadcast safe. This is known as a gamut warning sign or alert, and what it's telling me is that this yellow is not ideal for broadcast, so I should consider choosing this color, which will tone it down a little bit and be safer, meaning it won't bleed or distort. So I'm going to select that. It makes my text yellow. Going down further, I can also now adjust the opacity here as well of the fill, which will overall adjust the opacity of the text. We're going to skip sheen and text for a second here. Let's get into some strokes. I'm going to set an outer stroke, which gives me sort of like a border on the edge. Now when I hit outer stroke, that in itself has its own properties. The type of stroke, I can do edge, I can do what's known as depth by selecting depth. It gives me kind of a little bit more of a 3D feel. I can also use drop face, which doesn't do much right now in that sense. So let me go depth. It gives me a little bit of 3D depth. I can adjust the size of that depth. I can bring it out a little bit, etc. I can give it a little bit of an angle. So I can, give it a little bit of character. What's really nice about the Tyler in Premiere, it's really one of the best ones I've ever seen for a built-in editing program. It's very comprehensive and nice. I can adjust the color of that fill. I'm just going to leave it alone. I can adjust the opacity of that fill. Now let me go ahead and add a little shadow. So I select that and it gives me some shadow, and it's giving me a default 50%, the angle, the distance, the size, and the spread. So maybe I bring that opacity up a little bit. The whole idea behind this, I'm going to adjust the angle. The whole idea behind this is to create some separation between your text and your background, so you can read it, so it doesn't disappear or blend in. So there, I've given it a little bit of a shadow. I've created some separation between it, and it's pretty much done. One last thing I can do here, if I like what I've done here, which is pretty straightforward, but I want to save it, I can actually come down here. First off, do a quick Control S, Command S if you're on a Mac, and down here in Legacy Title Styles, click this little list view here, and you have an option that says, New Style. When you click New Style, it gives you this window, and by default, it's gonna name it the font name. But say you want to give it your own name, I'm gonna call it My Yellow Font, just to give it a unique name. I click OK, and it automatically parks it down here in this collection. So anything else that I type, I can simply click on this and apply it. Okay, more on that later. I'm going to do another Control S. I'm going to close this window, and that has updated my title over here in the project panel. Now, a couple things. If I double click on the clip, it will open the titler again. Okay. Oh, and one thing I wanted to show you that I didn't emphasize. There is one key button up here that is very important to know. It's called Show Background Video. When it's blue and highlighted, it means it's activated. If I deselect it, then I get the checkerboard. But what's nice about having it selected is that it basically shows you where you are in the timeline. So let me move the window out of the way, and you can see that down here the playhead is situated over the soundbite. So that way, when I create my title, I can compose it and have a better idea of how it's going to look against that background. You can even move the playhead right here below it within the titler. And let me move that over so you can see. You'll see it moving here when I adjust it here in the titler. See, so that's really nice. That is a very good way to figure out your composition ahead of time before you actually drop it in the timeline, which is what we're going to do here as a last task. So let me drag it now over my source. I see it there. You don't have to do that before you bring it down, but we did. So now I'm going to grab it and stick it down over on video 2 so it superimposes itself over my interview. And let's say I want to keep that up longer. I can click and trim it. This is trimming. We talked about it in another lesson. And now it is positioned above Caleb. I can even come back down and add a transition if I want. So I'm going to go to Video Transitions, and I'm going to drag my dissolve right down on it, place it on the front, and I'm going to place one on the back. So now it will come up, it will fade up while he's talking, stay up while he talks, etc., 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 and then it will fade out. It doesn't even have to be up that long, and then it will fade out, and he keeps talking, then we could cut to another shot. So that will have to be rendered, and we can follow up with that in the next lesson and move on to some other things we can do in the titler.